April 20th, 1999, Littleton, Colorado. The morning began like any other at Columbine High School. Students poured through the doors chatting about tests, prom, weekend plans. Spring was in the air. Some laughed in the cafeteria, others hustled through the halls to beat the bell. It felt safe, familiar. But two seniors, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were about to destroy that feeling forever. By 11:10 a.m., they were already in place. Dressed in trench coats, armed to the teeth, and carrying homemade propane bombs, they parked their cars to form a kill zone outside the school's exits. In their minds, this wasn't just a shooting. It was supposed to be a bombing on the scale of Oklahoma City. They placed two duffel bags containing massive propane bombs in the cafeteria, set to explode at 11:17 a.m., timed for peak lunch crowd. The bombs didn't go off, but what followed was even worse. At 11:19 a.m., they opened fire near the west entrance, targeting students outside. Rachel Scott was the first to be hit, fatally. Richard Castaldo beside her was shot and paralyzed. Panic spread. Screams, blood. No one understood what was happening at first. They moved into the school without hesitation. Inside, chaos erupted. Students and teachers scattered, some thinking it was a senior prank gone wrong, but the sounds of gunfire kept coming. Classroom doors slammed shut. Lockdowns were called. Some teachers threw desks against doors. Others ushered terrified students into closets. Then came the library. At 11:29 a.m., Eric and Dylan entered what would become the most tragic scene. More than 50 students were inside, hiding under tables, praying it would end. The gunman laughed, shouted insults, and asked students absurd questions before executing them. "Do you believe in God?" they asked one girl before pulling the trigger. "Peekaboo," one of them sneered as he crouched and fired on another hiding student. They stalked through the room like hunters, casually reloading, mocking, playing music from a radio they brought with them. The massacre lasted less than 10 minutes in the library, but 10 students were slaughtered. By 11:35, they left the library, fired a few more rounds through the halls, and returned to the cafeteria. Security footage later showed them inspecting the failed bombs. They tried to trigger smaller devices, but failed again. Eventually, at 12:08 p.m., they returned to the library. Police were outside now, surrounding the school. Inside, the horror had already unfolded. And then, one final sound. They turned their guns on themselves. The rampage was over. 13 people were dead. 12 students, 1 teacher. 24 others were injured. Hundreds more were psychologically scarred for life. Outside, parents gathered. Some wept with relief. Others collapsed when their child's name never came. The world watched as body bags were carried out. A nation mourned. In the weeks that followed, people tried to understand. Why? How? The answers were terrifying. The two had left journals, videos, manifestos.
Friggin' kid! If you do, I'll rip off your goddamn head and shove it so far up your friggin' ass, you'll be coughing up dandruff for 4 frickin' months!
Good.
Look, I don't care what you say. If you ever touch him again, I will frickin' kill you. I'm gonna pull out a goddamn shotgun and blow your damn head off. Do you understand, you little worthless piece of crap?
They wanted to be remembered. They wanted to inspire fear. And in a twisted way, they succeeded. Columbine became the blueprint for future school shootings. It was no longer unthinkable. It was real. Students across America began living with a new kind of fear. Schools installed metal detectors. Police walked the halls. Lockdown drills became routine. But for those who lived through it, none of that erased what happened. Survivors still carry the weight. Some never returned to school. Some never spoke about it again. Columbine wasn't just a tragedy. It was a cultural rupture. It was the day innocence died. And America never looked at its schools the same way again. December 14, 2012, Newtown, Connecticut. It was a quiet, cold Friday morning. Sandy Hook Elementary School, nestled in a peaceful suburb, was filled with the sounds of children, teachers greeting students, and the anticipation of winter break. The hallways were decorated with construction paper snowflakes and Christmas art. It was a picture of innocence. But just a few miles away, evil was preparing to enter. 20-year-old Adam Lanza had already murdered his mother in her bed. He had taken her car and her weapons, an AR-15 rifle, a Glock, a Sig Sauer, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He left behind no clear explanation, only rage and a plan. At 9:35 a.m., he arrived at the school. Without hesitation, he shot through the glass entrance doors, sending shattered glass flying into the main lobby. The sound startled everyone inside. Principal Dawn Hochsprung and school psychologist Mary Sherlock rushed toward the sound. They weren't armed. They didn't hesitate. They acted like heroes, and they died like heroes. Lanza shot them both as they tried to stop him. From there, the nightmare began. Lanza walked down the hallway toward the kindergarten and first grade classrooms. In room 8, substitute teacher Lauren Russo and her class of 6- and 7-year-olds heard the noise. Some stood frozen in confusion. Others started to cry. Lauren tried to protect them. She gathered them into a huddle. But Lanza stormed in and opened fire. Every child in that room, except one, was killed. In room 10, teacher Victoria Soto hid her students in a closet and storage area. When Lanza entered, she told him the class was in the gym. He shot her immediately. She died trying to mislead him, to protect her kids. Some students survived, silent and terrified in hiding, listening to the chaos unfold just feet away. Across the school, staff members moved quickly. Some barricaded doors, others led kids out back exits. One teacher locked her classroom and read stories aloud to calm her students. In a supply closet, a group of children held hands and prayed. In less than 5 minutes, Lanza had murdered 26 people, 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7, and 6 adult staff members. Children called 911 from under desks. "There's a man with a gun," one whispered. Dispatchers could hear gunshots in the background. It was fast, brutal, incomprehensible. At 9:39 a.m., police arrived on the scene. Officers flooded the building. Lanza, hearing them coming, walked into a classroom and shot himself in the head. The gunfire stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Officers swept the school and made a horrifying discovery. Small bodies, tiny shoes, blood smeared on walls, children hiding in terror. Some were found in closets. Others played dead among the slain. Many of the victims had been shot multiple times, some beyond recognition. Outside, parents gathered behind police tape, desperate for answers. Some were reunited with their children. Others waited and waited, until they were led to a nearby firehouse. There, one by one, parents were told, "Your child didn't make it." The screams that followed are something no one should ever have to hear. The nation wept. Even the president cried on national television as he read the victims' names. News anchors broke down live on air. The sheer horror of it, young children, first graders, gunned down in their classroom, was too much to bear. Memorials appeared almost instantly. Teddy bears, candles, flowers, handwritten notes, photos of smiling kids who should have been writing letters to Santa, not being buried in tiny coffins. But even in tragedy, darkness crept in. Conspiracy theorists claimed the shooting never happened, that it was all a hoax, a government setup. Crisis actors, they said. These lies spread online like wildfire, and the families who had already lost everything were harassed, threatened, accused of faking their own children's deaths. But it was real, all of it, every tear, every bullet, every scream. Sandy Hook became a turning point, again, just like Columbine, just like Virginia Tech. But still, nothing truly changed. Gun laws stayed largely the same. School shootings didn't stop. In fact, they increased. Some schools began locking every door. Others added armed guards. Bulletproof backpacks were sold in stores. Kindergartners were taught lockdown drills. Run, hide, fight became part of the school experience. But for the families in Newtown, nothing could bring back what was lost. 20 children, 6 adults, gone in 300 seconds. The halls of Sandy Hook were once filled with laughter, finger paint, and story time. Now, they're silent. February 14, 2018, Parkland, Florida. It was a warm, sunny Wednesday at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, Valentine's Day. Students wandered the halls with red balloons, pink carnations, candy grams in hand. Some flirted with crushes, others shared laughs between classes. The dismissal bell was less than an hour away. No one knew that within minutes, the school would become the site of one of the deadliest high school shootings in American history. At 2:19 p.m., Nicholas Cruz, a 19-year-old former student expelled for behavioral and disciplinary problems, arrived at the school via Uber. In a black duffel bag, he carried a legally purchased AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle, over 300 rounds of ammunition, and multiple magazines. He entered the campus through a side gate, one he knew wouldn't be guarded. He had studied the school layout. He knew which stairwell to climb, which building to target. He knew the timing. He had planned it all. Inside Building 12, students sat through their last period classes. No one noticed Cruz slip into a stairwell, open his bag, and begin loading his rifle. At 2:21 p.m., he pulled the fire alarm. It was the perfect trap. Thinking it was a routine drill, or worse, an actual fire, hundreds of students began to file into the hallways. Teachers opened doors. Confusion turned to panic within seconds. Cruz began firing down the hallways, into classrooms, through glass windows. The gunfire was loud, rapid, unrelenting. Screams erupted as students scrambled for cover. Some ran into classrooms, others froze. A few were shot as they tried to flee. Scott Beagle, a beloved geography teacher, was shot and killed as he held the door open for his students to escape. Aaron Feiss, a football coach and security guard, threw himself between the gunman and several girls, taking bullets in his own body. Chris Hickson, a Navy veteran and athletic director, ran toward the shots and was fatally wounded. Cruz continued his rampage for 6 minutes, moving floor by floor, switching magazines, firing at will. Over 150 rounds were fired in total. 14 students and 3 staff members were killed. 17 more were injured. Then, he dropped his rifle, blended in with the fleeing crowd, and escaped the school. Yes, he escaped. No one stopped him. The police arrived quickly, but by then, the shooting had ended. Students hid inside closets, bathrooms, and storage rooms, some for over an hour, terrified and unsure whether the killer was still hunting them. Outside, it was chaos. Parents were gathering, ambulances raced in, helicopters hovered above. Students streamed out with their hands above their heads, many crying, some bleeding. All changed. At 3:41 p.m., Cruz was arrested over a mile away, walking calmly down a residential sidewalk, but the damage was irreversible. Photos of the victims began to emerge, smiling faces, teens in dance team uniforms, honor students, athletes. One student was just 14 years old. Some had sent final texts to their parents during the attack. "I love you." Others had died holding hands. Then came the truth about the failures. The FBI had been warned about Cruz more than once. A detailed tip just 1 month before the shooting described his unstable mental health, obsession with violence, and threats to shoot up a school. The tip was never acted upon. School administrators had seen the signs. He had a long history of behavioral issues, animal cruelty, and disturbing online posts, but he slipped through the cracks. Worst of all, the one man who might have stopped him didn't move. School resource officer Scott Peterson, armed and trained, stood outside the building for over 45 minutes as the shooting unfolded. He heard the gunfire, and he did nothing. He would later be charged with multiple counts of child neglect and culpable negligence, though ultimately acquitted. But the damage to his name and the lives lost in those minutes left scars that still burn. Out of the grief rose a movement. Students like Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, Cameron Kasky, and many others became national voices overnight. They took their anger and trauma and turned it into action. They challenged politicians. They marched on Washington. They formed March for Our Lives, a youth-led organization demanding gun reform and accountability. Their courage inspired millions. But behind every speech, every protest, were parents planning funerals, survivors battling PTSD, a school filled with bullet holes and silence. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School reopened weeks later with new security measures, metal detectors, armed guards, clear backpacks. But the kids weren't the same. Some couldn't go back. Others never truly left the moment of the shooting. A loud sound, a fire alarm, a knock on the classroom door, Any of it could send them spiraling. February 14th stopped being a day of love. It became a day of mourning. 17 lives taken, dozens more scarred forever, a fire alarm that summoned death instead of safety, and a question that still echoes through every school hallway in America: how many more?